Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 52 of Run to the Hills. This week, I catch up with, Gary Ovs and with Tom Clifford, who we chatted to. We apologise because it was quite a while ago. We actually caught up with him and asked the listeners all sorts of nutrition questions to put to Tom and our own questions as well. And he was a fountain of all knowledge, food, eating. Are you touching your wrinkles as I'm talking to you?
Straight. My white beard, my wrinkles, yeah.
It was so interesting. We're going to talk to him for 4 days, and hopefully there'll be little bits of information that lots of people will take away from that as well. Are you right then? What's wrong? Why are you why are you playing with your wrinkles?
Why am I wrinkly? What? I didn't think I was. I was just, I don't know what I was doing. I was just touching. Nervous touching, yeah.
Prepping yourself. How's the running then?
Oh, fine, actually. We did...
hello. It's fine. Oh, thank goodness.
We did week one. I know we had a kind of false start, what I was going to do before I actually did it. But I didn't do all three workouts. I did two, which was the 5 times 4 minutes, and then I did a hilly kind of fartlek down the Dean. But what I did do, instead of doing the other session, I always like to do like a medium long run. So I did that instead of the workout, and threw some strides in there too with that. And then I did a long run on Sunday with Ray. He had he wanted to do the Trail Outlaws Penshaw half marathon route, because when he was supposed to do it originally as an event, he had to isolate, so he missed it. So we went and ran that together. Had some nice coffee and ice cream afterwards, which was always good. Not if it's good nutrition, but it was good. And then what did I do yesterday? We went to RSPB Saltholm Nature Reserve near us, which is where I live. It's right near industrial Billingham, and it's like dystopia. Apologies to people in Billingham, but that section of Billingham, it's got all steelworks, chemical plants, a nuclear power station. It's pretty, and they've got this kind of facility where they break oil rigs and warships and stuff like that. So if you go, it's really interesting, but pretty industrial. But in the middle of this, there's an RSPB nature reserve. So we went along there. And we took a bit of, there's marsh house harriers, loads of birds, European gulls and Mediterranean gulls, which I didn't even know was a thing. But apparently, if you've got any birders watching, then there's one of the tails is black and one of the tails is white. So that's the difference. But yeah.
Ornithologists, aren't they called? Bird watchers.
Well, the guy at the gate said birders. So I thought, well, he was.
Birders, that's better.
George stood us some cow poo, so that was pretty entertaining.
Oh, poor George.
And then I visualized when we did a kind of big loop of the reserve, and there was a bunch of cows, and I'm saying, well, if they put cows in here, they're not going to be aggressive cows and bulls. And I was thinking of all these ultra runners who moan about cows on race routes, and there's myself, George, and Lisa shimmying across a barbed wire fence because these cows just didn't really want to move. They were fine. They were just super curious. But it was good. I really enjoyed it. And we joined the RSPB. So as a result.
Oh, a happy end to the story. We used to, when I lived in London, we had the Barnes Wetlands Centre that was near us. It was again the same, like surrounded by town, but then they had this amazing array of birds and wildlife. And I used to go and push the pram mainly for the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I see a few birds.
I had nice vegan pasty, so any vegans and veggies, you're catered for there, so it was good. Very good.
How were the 4 minutes? You did 5 by 4 minutes.
You know what? It did. The pace was off. The effort was there. Definitely when I checked back on Garmin afterwards. It did feel hard, harder than what I wanted to. But tonight we're going to go all in with the 6 times 5 minutes and minute recovery. But I am going to, I went to heart rate zones instead of pace. So a zone's quite large. I think for me, it's like 153 to 162. So that's quite a lot of range there. So we're going to probably err on the side of caution and go the lower end of that zone. We'll try and do all 6 for the minute. And I've got Neil again. He sent me a text. So we're all locked in. It was fine. I enjoyed the hill session down the Dean. That was good. The only problem is I've mentioned this so many times, you don't get these long hills. So we got the duration, I think 20 minutes of work, but they were quite short and sharp. But All right. Yeah. What about yourself? Catch up on your week and the runs that you didn't do. We've had a chat about this.
Oh, well, I went out for a really good mate's 50th. When did we start having 50th birthday parties? And Eddie has one drink. Eddie has two drinks. Eddie becomes the life and soul of the party. My husband was so proud of me. It's like, I saw you. You went for the warm up. You were like, I like this. This is good. I'm feeling good. And he said, I didn't see you again until the taxi came, really. That's what I think everybody else did. Oh, but it was so much fun. There was a band. There was my mates. There was dancing. There was fizz. Got to do it. But oh, my life, did I pay for it the next day? Yeah, so I was meant to be meeting a mate. She was doing her last long run before Dragon's Back.
Yeah.
And I actually couldn't go anyway because Bryn had emergencies at work. So he had to work. But I couldn't. I mean, it was like fried egg, cup of tea, ketchup at about 2:30 sort of day. Nothing worse than looking after the kids with a hangover. They're relentless. They're relentless. I took them to the pool and they'd shut the pool that they swim in because some little kid had done so. Oh, God. So then they had to go in the big pool, which means I actually have to do surveillance.
Yeah.
I was like sitting rocking with my sunglasses on, thinking, what the lifeguards that normally like see me pounding up and down the pool or aqua jogging or something. And I was just sitting there going, talk to me. Nobody talks to me. Don't talk to me. Anyway, we rise above. The next day, I still felt hungover. These hangovers now, it took me about 3 days.
Definitely 2 or 3 days, yeah.
Oh, I can't do that again. But I'm back on it. I'm back on it now. Getting some miles in. Oh, that's not easy. This is like running malarkey. I am trying to put some good base miles down. An hour in the morning, maybe like 45 minutes again. I haven't done anything. I've got a session to do and I'm putting it off. I keep moving it along a bit. 3x5K, not today.
Wowzers, that is a big one.
Oh, it's a big one. So, but it's easy. It's easy 5K, steady 5K, go for it, last 5K. Yeah. And I did about 12K this morning and I was like, oh my God, I wouldn't even only be like, God, it feels like a long way. So I might try that tomorrow. See how much pizza I can eat tonight.
And what kind of recovery do you have?
No, it's just continuous. It's just like a really long, painful, horrible, progressive run. But I keep looking at my watch going, I'm not even at marathon pace and I'm running and it feels quite fast and it's not fast at all. I'm
quite worried about London because my level of fitness is way off and London's what, 5?
Well, unless London adds 2,000 meters of climbing, I'm nowhere near it. I can't run for like 10 miles of just running seems horrendous to me. So anyway, it always does. Do you remember that at the start when you restart proper training and you think, how did I do that? And it will come. Have faith, trust the process.
Should we talk about some race results? What have you got? Shropshire Way Ultra.
Shropshire Way Ultra, Thomas Lowe in 8 hours, 9 minutes, and Kate Green, female winner, in 10 hours, 25 minutes.
We had the Harmors 55, which is close to me on the moors, and they all got wet. Seemed like quite a rainy.
No!
I know, yeah. It wasn't cold, and I don't think it was windy either, but definitely I saw waterproofs on. Quite a few friends doing that, so well done everybody. But Hem Renner took the win, 8 hours 34 and 8 hours 34 minutes and 14 seconds. Now, I saw somebody pointing this out. It wasn't me. I didn't do this bit of research, but he did Scarfell Trail Marathon and an Abrams T round in the same week. So, wowzers, that is some good going.
What's he having in his tea? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
That's some recovery.
And Emma Moore, or Moore, it depends where you're from in the country, took the win for the ladies, 10 hours and 10 minutes and 6 seconds. So, yeah, amazing. Well done, everyone. I did look at my time actually, Eddie, for that after you pressed me for it, and I was just over, I think 9 hours and something. I did it in 9:16 maybe, so I wouldn't have won.
Not this year.
Not this year, no.
Let's go straight ahead now and listen to our interview with Tom Clifford about all things eating, drinking, what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, how we eat and train, and how we best eat for recovery. So here's our interview with Tom. are delighted this week to welcome Tom Clifford, nutritionist extraordinaire, to our podcast. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Edwina. Thank you for having me on. I'm very well, thank you.
Where are you now? What are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm fine. I'm in the Midlands. I'm at Loughborough. I'm currently in my office. We're allowed in the office for specific reasons if we're teaching, etc. So I'm currently in the office today. Had some work this morning. There's actually a match of cricket going on outside, which is very interesting. Nice. So it's quite nice to see some outdoor sports starting again, because Loughborough University campus is very green, lots of open space. But I'm fine. It's nice to see the good weather coming back and able to actually go sit in a pub garden again, which is really fun.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to be sitting in a university and doing what you do? Because you're really highly qualified in your field, and I'd really just like a little recap of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, that's fine. I did an undergraduate degree in sport and exercise science, which I finished now about 10 years ago. And then I did I did a bit of personal training. I did a few bits and bobs around kind of fitness coaching and fitness management. And then I went and did a master's in sports performance with nutrition. And then after that, I went and got a PhD, which was all around recovery nutrition, mostly around phytochemicals. And I'm sure we'll get onto that later on. And specifically beetroot was probably what I was mostly interested in, as Gary can attest to from being a participant from one of those studies. And then I finished in 2017 my PhD, and I went to work at Newcastle University. So I did my PhD up in Northumbria, and then I basically walked across the road, because Newcastle and Northumbria are right next to each other.
I remember that. I remember the Barney's hockey matches.
Yeah, I think that still goes on. Yeah, and so I went over to Newcastle, and that was more then in a lecturing role. So I was, instead of research, I was doing more teaching work. But at the same time, I got a qualification, or I applied to be registered with the Sports and Exercise Nutrition Register, which is fairly new. I mean, it's probably been around 10 years, but I still don't think loads of people know about it. But the SCNR, as it's often called, is basically a register, as a competency-based register for exercise nutrition professionals. So if you're aware that nutrition isn't the best regulated, dietetics is, but nutrition per se isn't. Okay. So it is a voluntary register, but you apply to go on it essentially to say, I have these credentials to actually be able to support you. So I started doing quite a lot of nutrition support work in rugby. So I worked with the Newcastle Falcons up in the Northeast. I worked with the university rowing team and various other athletes that came my way, either via the university or via other sports as well. And then I moved, 2019, down to Loughborough University. Again, as a lecturer, more of a focus on research here than it is on teaching. Okay. So I'm a lecturer in nutrition and physiology. I still do a little bit of applied work. I'm doing some work advising some Olympic fencers at the moment, but I mostly do research in nutrition at the moment. And that's how I got to where I am now, I suppose.
Cool. And is it something that you've always been interested in? Is food and how it affects your performance, and especially recovery? Is that something that is sort of been part of your life for a long time, or is it sort of something that's developed?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I have thought about this myself. And I think that when I went to university, I was very interested in sports science. And I was probably most interested in how people build muscle and how people lose weight. Pretty much the basic stuff. I think I was interested.
Those are the two things that most people, that is nutrition. Those are the two things that most people want to know the answers to, isn't it?
Exactly. And I was exactly the same. And I think that it wasn't until I started, when you go along your degree, you start to pick individual modules. And I kept realizing I'm picking nutrition here. And then my dissertation, I picked nutrition too. So I started to realize that nutrition is what I was interested in. And then I think it was really when I did my master's and I did a nutrition project in my dissertation for that I really was like, I enjoy this sports nutrition. I enjoy this specific area that I'm looking at. And then I went on to pursue it further. So Yeah, I think I probably, my first love for it was really purely just the same as everyone else, just a pure interest, probably more for selfish reasons. Whereas as time went on through education, I think is where I actually started to develop more of a passion for it.
And are you a runner yourself, Tom?
Yes and no. I don't know what qualifies.
There was a pause.
When you say a runner, I suppose I have to
Do you
qualify.
enjoy the process of putting your trainers on, going outside, getting a sweat on?
I do, yeah. So I am a runner. I've been injured for quite a while now, a good few months. So I've ended up, I can do about 6 miles and that's about it. And my leg just starts to go. But yeah, I've done 6, 7 half marathons, probably 10K races. I try and do them as regularly as I can. Once this injury goes, I'll hopefully get back up to that. I wouldn't say I'm a fast runner. I've done a sub 40 10K once.
Yeah.
That's probably my level. And
I think they're the benchmarks, aren't they? A sub 40 and a sub 20 and a sub 90. They're whether they're fast or slow, but they're the kind of figures that people kind of.
I'll take it then.
Put out there.
Take it.
so yeah, other than I probably manage about 12 miles a week at the moment, just to make sure I'm not damaging myself too much while I keep in the physio. But hopefully I'll get back to, I probably won't ever go to a full marathon level, I'll be honest. I'm not sure my legs are going to take it. I seem to break down enough just training for half marathons.
Yeah.
Bit of cross training you need in there, Tom. Doesn't have to all be about the running.
No, you are very right. You are very right.
I can talk to you about Swift and cycling as much as you like. Harry loves it.
Oh, not anymore, please.
Oh God! But you know what? I have to say, I don't like cycling. I'm not.
We can't be friends.
I find it so boring. I'm terrible. But I used to say that about running. So maybe one day.
Okay, and a final little intro opener for me. What's your daily diet like?
Ooh.
You're looking quite healthy. You look quite trim. You're coming out of lockdown looking.
Well, I'm making sure this is high enough.
You've got the special filter. I've got special filters on mine.
No, yeah, my diet's quite routine actually. I think I am someone who gets into routines quite easily, and what I found with lockdown, I suddenly I'm eating this exactly at this time, and I just eat it every day. So I tend to exercise in the morning, so probably other than a coffee, I don't really have anything before I exercise.
Okay.
And then normally it's yogurt, granola-based berries, things like that, possibly porridge with honey, something like that. And then around lunch varies. If I've been organized enough to make sure I do some batch cooking if I am in work anyway, then I quite like having things like paellas, risottos. I cook quite a lot of that. Anything that's easy to make 4 at a time. So quite a lot of that. Dinners as well. I mean, have a lot of salad. We have a lot of fresh salad, a lot of fresh vegetables. I'm quite a big fan of chucking everything in a wok or just in the oven. Yeah. And just loads of veg, different flavorings. So as an example, last night I had fajitas, but we don't have them with wraps, or we didn't last night. We just decided to have fajitas with lots of veg. And we made
it's a bit messy. How do you hold?
No, yeah. So we just, it's just like
I was trying to visualize it.
Straight from the pan.
Well, do you know what? Now I think about it, yeah. Fajitas is a really bad way to describe that. I suppose it's fajita seasoning and food you have with fajitas, but without the fajita aspect. So I'll have to think of a new name for it. But yeah, so generally, I'd say it's pretty healthy. I think I probably drink too much wine at the moment, but I'm putting that down to lockdown.
Very common in lockdown, the wine consumption. I see the recycling bins on a Friday full of wine bottles.
You were judgy neighbour, Gary, as you're running along.
Oh,
number 34. Oh, that's a big night.
That's not like me, Eddie.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to think of some vices because I thought that sounded really healthy. And I'm not
you sounded dull, but we'll go.
Yeah, it does sound dull. I do really like chocolate, and that's probably my.
Yeah.
We like to get a lot of those packs of lint balls that you get and so it's very difficult to not have a couple of them.
It's very difficult as we're all not going, not that I do go out in the evening, but when there's nothing to do in the evening as well, and there's very little joy in life, you're like, well, I need something to look forward to. I need something to sort of satiate. What's the word? When you need a little bit of something that just makes life.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit depressing, doesn't it? But
you're right. It's something like that. And I think what I found working at home, when you were kind of at home all the time, to try and switch off and make that switch from work, and now it's my evening, I'm going to relax, I would want something. So I think it's either, a glass of wine, it was chocolate, or crisps and something like that, just something about 5, 6 o'clock when it was time to switch. So that's quite a bad habit.
Day. Yeah, I get that. We call it cocktail hour in our house. It's like cocktail hour, turn Zoom off, let's start the party, which isn't a party. Worst party ever.
We've got a few questions from over on Facebook, if that's all right, Tom.
Yeah.
Right. No particular order, so these might kind of come at you quite random. But yeah, why does eating get harder the longer you run? So if you're on I'd say an ultra marathon, for example, and you want to eat, but you just can't stomach it.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it will be very individual for each person. But I suppose on a general level, there's a few things. And one of the main ones is obviously fatigue, taste fatigue. It just becomes more and more difficult to actually consume the same types of foods. And I think particularly as generally we are pushed towards eating carbohydrate-y, sweet, kind of sugary type foods, you don't realize until you do some quite long exercise, actually, these are really difficult to eat in high quantities over a significant amount of time, which is not how you think when you do just have some chocolate and you think you can have the whole bar. But when it comes to running, it does make it a lot more difficult. So I think because when you're doing an ultra, you're not just considering how to fuel yourself correctly, but it's also what can I take with me, what's available, what can I carry, and all of those types of things, that you end up having the same types of foods. So I think it's really difficult to actually be encouraged and excited for when, right, I've got to eat again, and you just think this is my sixth candy bar.
Cocktail hour.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's definitely not cocktail hour. So I think that's definitely, and I don't know a specific reason or mechanism for that. I think it's definitely got to be psychological, and it's probably something to do with your taste buds, but I don't know exactly. I think the other one, in this again, is the one that probably varies most, is just to do with people's gastrointestinal system and how well they can actually tolerate foods. So how well they can actually consume them and get them into their body. And everyone's is slightly different. We all absorb foods at a different rate. So I think some people are going to find it a lot more harder if what they've just consumed, say, an hour before, it hasn't quite gone all the way through. They've still got some sitting there, and actually it's caused them a bit of discomfort, yet they're putting more on top of it. And obviously this is going to pile up over time. So I think they're probably the main reasons. The thing is, I think it hasn't been studied in loads of detail if we went from a research and science point of view, because to get people into a lab environment and say, right, go and doing 12 hours on that treadmill is really unpleasant. And then, we can take some blood samples and see what's going on. So I think that other than probably just anecdotal or us trying to hypothesize and put things together, I'm not sure, I'm definitely not aware of a complete scientific reason.
I say to a lot of clients when they're like, I couldn't eat it, I'm like, yeah, but it's not something after 12 hours, even after 5 hours, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience eating. And I think a lot of people new to ultras find that a bit of a shock because they expect it to be like a really easy sort of picnic day out. And you're like, your body isn't actually going to want to eat because all the signals are coming to it is that you're running, you're in this sort of flight mechanism, aren't you? And you just got to put it in. I think people are always looking for something, this is going to be great. This is going to taste great. And actually, when you're out in 80 miles into 100 miles, nothing really is going to taste amazing.
You're just happy if it stays down. I think that's the...
Yeah. And you are right. And I think that it's interesting, this question is, I know you said no particular order, but I think any work that I've ever done with triathletes or cyclists, this is the question they always ask. And I always feel bad that I can never give them a really good answer, other than try a variety of different types of food. Try some savory foods. Try and train your gut, as we might call it. So go out for.
Well, that was one of the other questions, actually.
Okay,
Is there a way of training your gut to?
Yeah, and again, if I try and refer back to the science on this, it hasn't been studied in loads of detail, but there is some evidence, and some of my colleagues here at Loughborough University have looked at this a little bit of detail and are hoping to eventually in the future as well, I think, is that you do seem to be able to adapt, so you can train the gut. So if you were to go out for a run, cycling, whatever it is that your event might be, if you are consuming foods equivalent to what you might hope to do during a race or an event or whatever it is you're training for, and if you practice that steadily over time, it does seem that you can get your gut to adapt and actually take on those foods a lot better, and hopefully it'll be a lot more comfortable for you. So not masses of evidence. It's not something that I could say wholeheartedly definitely works, but I think there's enough there to say that it could. And I think intuitively it does make sense. Yeah. I mean, if you want to get faster, then you run faster. It's things like this, and you think, well, if you want your gut to tolerate foods better, then start running and start eating, and it's going to happen. So. Yeah.
And another question came up. In your opinion, or what would be the best breakfast you could have? You know, you got a big long run planned, marathon day, for example. Have you got any advice for what people should be consuming? Yeah,
good question. And I think what I would always say, so if we were to take an example of a marathon, and the advice would probably vary slightly depending on if you were a 4-hour marathon runner or if you were, a 2.5-hour marathon runner.
Okay, yeah.
But you start to run out of your carbohydrate or glycogen fuel stores, which is your stored form of carbohydrates, which is really important for higher intensity exercise. After, say, 90 minutes, 2 hours, you start to run low. So hence why you do an event over that time, you often want to take on some kind of carbohydrate to keep you topped up. Now, you want to have enough in the tank to last for that amount of time. So if you come to the start line and in the few days before, you haven't fueled properly, so you haven't topped up those stores to have as much in them as they can, then you're going to be suboptimal. And if you know that you haven't fueled correctly, and you know that maybe you did a bit too much exercise, you didn't taper as well as you should, so therefore you've depleted the stores, then that morning, you may want to consume a higher carbohydrate breakfast than you normally would to make sure you are topping up. And the easiest way to do that is anything that's quickly to digest. So toast, white toast, is always a really good option. Things like jam, marmalade. And then cereals, any kind of sweety, sugary stuff is also going to be fine to go with it. Things like crumpets, anything like that, I think is a really good kind of breakfast to have. Now, I will say, on the other hand, most people, I think, actually probably do fuel correctly. So if you're running on a Sunday, most people probably have stopped going out for long runs by Thursday or something like that. The only reason I bring this up is I know some people can't let it go. And, Friday, Saturday, they're still doing exercise and thinking...
Parkrun on a Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. You think maybe just, rest a little bit. And so if you are having quite a high carbohydrate diet in those days, then when you sleep overnight, I think people get a little bit too obsessed that in the morning they need to have loads of carbohydrates. But actually, you should be properly fueled. And if you're not doing any exercise, then you're going to lose a little bit of glycogen while you sleep, but not much, only just, to keep you ticking over. So actually, you probably just need to top up your stores, your fuel stores. So if you just have a breakfast that you're comfortable with, then I would say in 95% of the cases, that would be absolutely fine. And I wouldn't stress too much. The only things I would say to avoid is anything really high fat, anything really high fiber, or any foods that that you don't tolerate that well when you have them. So anything that you're comfortable with, then that would always be the best option.
And would there be your race is at 10 o'clock, then would you say don't eat your breakfast any later than 8 o'clock or?
Yeah, I mean, generally, that's normally a good way to do it. You normally say somewhere between 90 minutes to 3-4 hours, something like that, before is the kind of opportunity to consume a breakfast and make sure that actually digests appropriately. then this is where, so if you were to have something quite high fat, so if you were to have a fry up or something like that, I mean, in the Northeast, I'm pretty sure.
He knows you so well, Gary.
Yeah. I mean, my experience with some runners in the Northeast, this isn't atypical, but so if you had something like that, fat can take 5-6 hours to digest.
Oh, interesting.
So obviously you'd have to get up at 2 a.m. I think to make sure that you've got it digested. So if you're having something fairly high carb, low fat, which is what I would advise, then about 2 hours before we're perfectly fine.
I love it. It's the only time I don't feel guilty by consuming lots of white carbohydrates. It's every other time it's kind of wholemeal or kind of fibrous stuff. But yeah, a few days before the race, everything turns white. It's great.
Yeah, and I do think it's something that people stress about a little bit too much, carbohydrate loading.
I tell people, and Tom, you tell me if this is sort of right or wrong, but a lot of my clients, I say, if you've got your taper right, then actually your level of training has dropped off so much, your body will naturally be carb loading, not carb loading, because it will be holding on to those, the glycogen, because you're not continually needing that for exercise. And if you're well trained, your body is so good at doing those stores because every day it expects that you're going to be using. So I think there's a lot of focus on carb loading, which actually people get stressed about, which is actually one part of the race you really don't need to get stressed about. Just let the body store, let the sort of training that you've done before, it will naturally store that energy that you use. Do you sort of agree with that?
Yeah. I think the reality is there's a ceiling effect. And I think, you can only have so many carbs before you're actually topped up. So I think you're right. If you pretty much have your normal diet for 3-4 days for a race and you're doing quite minimal activity, then I think you'll be fine. I mean, the only situations where you might want to make or be a little bit more nitpicky about it is if you are doing something that's longer, and also perhaps if, let's say, on a Sunday you're doing an event and maybe you've got another race on the Tuesday evening or something like that, you might want to be a bit more careful. And obviously, I think a lot of people draw inspiration maybe from things like the Tour de France, where carbohydrates are very important. Fueling right is very important because you go and do 5-6 hours and then, 16, 17 hours later, you've got to do it again.
Yeah.
So I think that then it's extremely important. But I think for most people who are going to do, say, a race on a Saturday or Sunday, and probably not again another one for at least a week or 2 weeks or something like that, you're going to be okay.
And is there, sorry, one more question, Eddie. So assuming you're doing a race and you can consume the food, is there a kind of a limit of carbohydrate per hour you should be, maybe not to exceed? I've heard somewhere like 60 grams an hour or something like that, but then I've heard that also go up to 100 grams an hour on other podcasts and stuff. I was just curious what your opinion was.
Yeah, it can get quite confusing. And I think the first thing to always be a bit wary of is when you do hear these perfectly round numbers, because what 60 grams for one might be 60 grams completely different for someone else, depending on how they take it. But basically, of all the scientific evidence, that's what these are based on for all the studies that have been done. And they're a pretty good ballpark to start on. So if you're looking at something that's going to be around 2 hours or more, or 90 minutes or more, the suggestion is normally to have somewhere between 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour.
Okay.
And then when it comes to, when you mentioned about 100 grams there, so if you want to increase it to something like 100 grams, normally it's around 90 grams. I think the absolute limit is around 120 grams that you can probably take on, in terms of you won't be able to digest carbohydrates at more than 2 grams per minute. So 120 grams an hour is probably going to be your limit anyway. Most normal humans will not be able to do that while running at a significant speed anyway.
Do try, Gary.
Yeah, you can give it a try. I mean, 30-60 is quite hard as it is. But when it comes to increasing to that, up to say 90 or anything more than 60 really, is where the general guidance now is to make sure that you have different types of carbohydrates or different types of sugars. Okay. So often people now look at glucose and fructose. If you combine them together, we can actually get them through the gut and into the circulation efficiently. Whereas if you just had 90 grams of one of them, then they would actually blocked, because there's a limit of how much can be transported.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Is there a difference in the way that women and men use the fuel during exercise?
Yes, it's a good question, and I don't think there's enough known about it. What's really positive at the moment is in the last year or so, there's been a lot of talk, or just a lot of, I suppose, people actually discussing, well, why have we not got hardly any data on females in sports science? So there's almost been this kind of big reflection of everyone in sports science saying, okay, we've done a really bad job in the last 20, 30, 40 years since sports science started doing lots and lots more research. And so I think hopefully there seems to be a lot more groups now work on this. In the next few years, we'll start to learn some of this, because there is, and I'm not an expert in this, but there is some data in females versus males, and there's not huge changes at the moment, but there needs to be more research to actually have a look in detail about this.
I've definitely noticed as I've got older as a female athlete that I used to be able to hit the sugar train when I was an Ironman triathlete before as a runner, and I could live off gels for an event or for training, no problem. And then I'd recover. And now I can't do that anymore. Not only I think the recovery is very different as you get older, but I think the way that I use those quick carbohydrates is very different as well. I think I react differently to them and I don't feel good. It feels a bit like now when you have a drink and you can't take the hangover.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Which I'm sure is the same sort of thing. So it's something that I know that, and I had a look at quite a lot of the research that you've done, and some of it is in women, but there's so little out there for women to. Well, we're trying to encourage women into sport and into trail running, but actually there's very little. A lot of it is anecdotal of, our experience as women and what we found that worked, and with very little science to back it up. But I think it'd be really exciting to do a little bit more sort of into the differences between male and female and how they fuel and all sorts of things like that.
Absolutely. And I think even, like you said, a little bit of the anecdotal. I mean, I'm not even aware of loads of research that has actually got hold of, say, elite female athletes and said, well, how do you actually fuel? And I'm not even sure of that, but, there's been profiles on people, Chris Froome in the literature, there's profiles and things like that, but there's not so much for female athletes. And I think there's a huge gap that needs to be addressed. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll start to see that being addressed.
As a sports scientist and a sports nutritionist, what are the sort of biggest mistakes that you see, even elite sports people making, that when you walk into like help a team or something, do you ever go, oh my, you're still doing this, guys?
Good question.
Lucasade?
Oh, that's a sponsor gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I think, yeah, do you know, that is a good one. It's not, and I think I get
you used to see the footballers, didn't you, like chugging back on the sports drinks, just making sure that you just don't see that so much now. I think there's a bit more there is a bit more work in the background going into nutrition, but is there anything that people are still doing, or what's sort of the biggest thing that people do that drives you mad?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and this is probably maybe more younger athletes, I don't know, but one thing that I realized a lot is that quite a lot of people skip breakfast, and I'm not saying breakfast is the be all and end all and that you should definitely have it, but one of the things I noticed in people who are trying to gain weight in any kind of way, because you're doing, and I think, we do talk a lot about body mass loss and losing weight and things like that, and that's generally, I'd say, what most people, when they think of nutrition, they immediately think of weight loss, but actually putting on weight is quite important too for various different individuals. And I find quite a lot of people do tend to skip certain meals, and particularly breakfast, because they're in a rush and they're not organized as much. And I always found that, and this is probably me talking more from my experience in rugby, admittedly, where I found that people wanted to be a certain size, certain shape, but they weren't really willing to be organized enough, so that in the mornings it was the one that they would always skip. And I found that I was kind of always, whenever I meet with them, I was just saying the same thing over and over again, is that you need to make sure that you're doing this. So off the top of my head, that's one. I think coming back to the Lucasade one, and I think I would actually say sometimes with football players, as an example, it's hard to actually get them to consume anything like that.
Yeah.
And you actually probably want them to have a little bit more. So I think Lucozade and I think you can have too much, and I think that I was definitely guilty of this when I used to play football. And we kind of touched on it earlier about how once you've got a level of carbohydrates, if you keep having more, it's not going to go in. And I remember being guilty of going to buy 2 or 3 Lucozades and having them before a match. And I think that's probably not as much there at the elite level, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think probably at the less elite level, it definitely is still. And I think it comes back to what we were saying, that is you should have really done all your fueling, or 90% of it, about 24, 48 hours before you actually come to it. If you're scrapping around trying to fuel within a couple of hours of something, then that's going to be quite a problem.
I used to get really told off when I was a younger athlete at uni as well by the dentist, because I used to fuel so much on gels and sugar, and they used to be like, you're rotting your teeth because you're relying on so much, and because you're putting it straight into your mouth and you're not chewing, you've got to be really careful of your teeth. And I think that's something that's not mentioned to athletes at all, that actually that form of fueling, not only long term is it bad, personally I think it's bad for your body, but also your dental health.
I know. It's really bad. Yeah, you are right. And I think that's where there needs to be more variety, more looked at. And again, there's some more research coming out starting to look at, instead of carbohydrate drinks, can we not just use carbohydrate foods? So people have done stuff on, where they get people in a lab and they look at if you have potato instead of a carbohydrate drink.
Yeah.
And it seems fine, and it works fine. Or you can have bananas instead of carbohydrate drinks. So I think that there are other options, but sometimes we're very quick to reach for a bottle of something sugary instead of thinking about actual foods that we could use instead.
Yeah. Is there anything that actually works? Caffeine's thrown around a lot, beetroot, cherry juice. Your research that you've done, is it something that you go, you can definitely find some evidence this does work?
Yeah. And I would say from them, caffeine is the one that probably does work. Yeah. For most people, not for everyone, but for most people. And I think that's probably across almost all sports and all scenarios. Caffeine seems to be able to help reduce fatigue. So I think that's definitely useful. Beetroot juice, I think that's, at the moment, you say for more short, intense type exercise. So maybe a 5 to 10K range, something like that.
Okay.
Beetroot juice might help then, but there's not much evidence that it will help if you go in 3, 4, 5 hours, longer duration type stuff. So beetroot juice is pretty good. I'd put caffeine probably number 1, beetroot juice just behind that. Cherry juice is more looked at for recovery, I would say. And the evidence is pretty strong for that. The argument I would make with what you have to be careful with some of the recovery type drinks like this is that, again, if you're a runner, you're probably running on a Sunday and you're not competing again properly, in terms of competing for an event or whatever it might be, for at least a few weeks or, at least a few days or a week. And you can probably recover fine in that time without having to try and spend lots of money on these supplements that might help by a very small amount. Now, if you're a football player and you've only got 48 hours before your next match, and you're feeling sore and you're tired and you want to get that extra 5%, then you're going to probably chuck the kitchen sink at it. So I think for team sports, the Olympics coming up is a great example of things like hockey, handball. They're often 24 hours apart. Yeah. It's the same with the Netball Super League at the moment. So they're playing back to back. For them, you can see, right, you need to be pretty spot on. If there is any kind of recovery supplements like cherry juice that might help, then I'd advise it. But I think from runners, it's probably something that's less needed. And I think it would you'd have to judge that based on yourself. So again, if you're running a marathon on Sunday, but you've got a 10K event Tuesday evening, then you might think, do you know what, I could do with that. I'm feeling a bit sore. Let's go for it. But actually, if you think that you're okay, then you're probably going to be fine with just having food and having lots of fruits and vegetables. And what about during an event? We kind of talk about carbohydrate for energy, but if you're on a lot of our listeners may be doing endurance marathons, 24-hour events, would you start consuming protein too during that event, during that time scale, or you think the carbohydrates would be sufficient? Yeah, I think they would be sufficient. I think protein would help in terms of you are gonna want extra calories, and probably you're gonna want something slightly different. So again, a little bit like the taste fatigue that we talked about earlier. So I think having protein foods can help. I think that the protein is not your primary source of fuel, so it won't necessarily help you in that way. You can turn it into fuel, and again, you can have it because it might help from a taste perspective. So I wouldn't advise against it, but equally, it's probably not something that I would say you need to load up on because it's going to help your performance.
Yeah. All right, Tom. We talked about wine and chocolate lint balls. We've got Netflix on. You can share with us your favorite binge show. But yeah, we want the snack. What would you say instead of hitting the red wine and the lint balls? What should we be aiming for in the cupboard or the fridge?
We're going for healthy snacks now, right?
Yeah.
My go-to snack, and you can get these in individual pots now, or you can just get them as a big load of it, but is fat-free Greek yogurt is probably my go-to. Really high protein, got some good carbs in it, and not too high in calories if that's what you're interested in as well. And you can get lots of flavored ones, which are pretty good. You know, Arla do some good ones now. I've seen Nestle have just brought out some ones as well, which I think are really good because they're probably more snack size. But I always quite like if you have just got some fat-free Greek yogurt, then spooning in, half a pot out into a bowl or something like that, adding in a few berries, possibly some seeds, maybe some flavorings. If you are into protein powders and you've got some flavored protein powder, that goes quite well. I actually like, if you get hot chocolate powder, I quite like the Options hot chocolate powder, the kind of low calorie. If you put a spoonful of that in, and I've already said that I like my chocolates, so that's probably why I'm saying this.
That's a good one.
But things like that, that's probably that would be my go-to, and I think that's probably what I would recommend.
If you weren't watching the calories, though, would you go for the full-fat Greek yogurt? Would that be nutritionally better, or?
I think we're nutritionally fine. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, again, mine, I suppose, is for watching the calories. And I suppose my answer was probably for those who would be. But if you're not, then no, absolutely.
And what are you watching on Netflix while you're binging on your Greek yogurt?
I'm trying to think of the best thing that I watched recently on Netflix. I really enjoyed The Queen's Gambit. That was really entertaining.
That was good, wasn't it? Yeah.
Really good. I did really enjoy that, actually. I'm probably more of a film nerd, I would say. Than I do watch a lot of TV shows like that, like Netflix-based ones. But I've probably watched more films recently with the BAFTAs and the Oscars coming out. I want to try and make sure I can catch up with as many of them as I can.
I've been trying to watch James Bond for about 2 years, but they keep putting it back.
I know. Yeah, it will come out eventually.
And finally, Tom, one little nugget of nutrition, your biggest nutrition tip that you could give to our listeners if they don't do anything else. What is probably to you the most important thing to do to look after our bodies food-wise?
Okay, I'll try and give two, because one that I'd like to say.
I love two because I got six actually. So
okay, fine. But one that I like to say, and whether this is a food tip or not, is learn to cook basic foods and try and use fresh ingredients. And I think that it's not a food per se, but it's one of the key things that I think really lets people down, is just not having 5 or 6 decent meals, snacks or foods just in the locker that they know they can whip up in half an hour. They know what the ingredients are, they know what to do. And I think I would really advise that to anyone. I think as well, flavorings, working out how to make and do your own flavorings, so things around fresh herbs. I think, when I discovered fresh herbs, however long ago it was, probably not that long ago knowing me, it changed my life. So I think that, and this might be borne out from working with quite a few younger athletes, is that they are not good with cooking at all. And actually, surprisingly, I suppose, maybe as you go to the higher level as well, a lot of these athletes aren't very good either. And they'll just cook whatever's put in front of them or anything that's quite basic. So I think learning some really simple meals that are nutritious, have lots of fruits, veg, etc., lots of herbs and spices, instead of, reaching for some kind of ready-made pot that you can get in the supermarket, would be my biggest tip for anyone, I would say. And then nutritionally, I would probably say, make sure to have a keen eye on your protein intake throughout the day. And I think that one thing, most people have enough protein when it comes to dinner time, or tea time, as they would say in the Northeast, which I always, when I realized being from the South moved up, it got really confusing. People, I think, do have enough protein at that stage. Normally there's some kind of meat, I would say. Lunch, probably not bad as well. Breakfast, I would say they normally let themselves down. And I think snacks, they normally let themselves down. So I think what I would normally say is have a look at your diet. So have a think a little bit about what it is you probably 80-90% eat on a daily basis. And if you want to you can get apps where you can just put the data in. So you can say, let's say you did have Cocoa Pops for breakfast, then you can put in Cocoa Pops and milk, and you can see what the kind of breakdown is. What kind of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats am I actually having? And steadily throughout the day, every 2 to 4 hours in terms of protein intake, if you can just increase that to somewhere around about 20 grams, 15 to 20 grams, or we normally say in depending on your body weight. So maybe 0.20, 0.25 grams per kilo of body weight. So somewhere between 15 to 25 grams. Okay. Then I think that people will get benefits in terms of recovery, keeping their muscles nice and strong, in terms of making sure they're also remodeling effectively as well from all the breakdown that they're getting from doing intense exercise. So I think increasing your protein intake, so it's not just let's have a huge amount with dinner, not so much at the other parts of the day, is actually making sure that you are topping it up every few hours.
I think a previous guest, Sarah McCormack, she mentioned that, didn't she? Spreading a protein out during the day was a big kind of plus for her. That's interesting. And what's next for you, Tom? What's any research in the pipeline, studies coming up?
Yeah. So I'm still doing some work around phytochemicals, which I'll probably explain a little bit more about that is. But when people hear the term superfoods, and they see that, blueberry and pomegranate is going to cure all ailments, etc. I'm interested in that in terms of exercise performance. So I'm interested in whether we eat more of these foods, can it improve our health, but also can it help mostly recovery after exercise is what I'm interested in. Yeah. And that's because our impairments or our ability to recover is intricately linked to inflammation. Yeah. And I'm not saying inflammation is a bad thing. It can be in certain situations, but not always. And these phytochemicals in these foods might help to temper any inflammation that might be causing us issues. So I'm interested principally in that. So I'm going to be doing some more work in that area. I'm also looking to do some more work in plant-based athletes as well, and plant-based proteins too. So that's another, I suppose it's linked to the phytochemical because mostly it's plant foods that do have highest amounts of phytochemicals. But yeah, that's probably where my most of my research will be in the next few years.
Cool. Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Please
I know
do.
we're wrapping it out there, but what's your sort of initial findings on that so far? I mean, being a plant-based athlete, especially in the ultra running world, is really super fashionable at the moment, and I think a lot of people are getting it very wrong at the moment, and it becomes much more just an excuse for a restrictive diet. I think you have to really educate yourself. I've gone up ranted, sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine.
But so what your sort of initial findings in that, and why sparked the interest in that?
So we haven't started yet, so I'm sorry. So I can't give you any
but I knew there must be something that you must have found something that has.
But yeah, in terms of my, I suppose, knowledge, like you say, to spark in it. Do you know what actually did spark my interest in it was I did a talk. There's a running shop in the Northeast in Gosforth somewhere. I can't remember what it's called.
Up and Running, I think.
Up and Running. I went, when I was up, this was a few years ago, I got asked to go and do a talk there. And there was lots of ultra runners there. And as you say, it's become very popular for people to go vegan or plant-based in some kind of way. And there was somebody there who was a very good ultra runner who was vegan, and they expounded the benefits of being a vegan, which is fine. But I think they talked a lot about anecdotally how they recover so much quicker. And then everyone else who went vegan said they did as well. I thought, okay, that's fine. Where is any scientific evidence for that? And there isn't, essentially, but no one's looked at it, in fairness. So that, I remember that kind of put the seed in my head a few years ago, and I thought that would be really good to look at. So that's principally where the idea came from. And I think that if we were to look at why it might happen, why plant-based diets might be better for recovery, then it probably would just be linked to that, the fact they have higher amounts of fruits and vegetables, or higher amounts of whole grain foods, or foods that are rich in these various phytochemicals, which might help recovery. So that's what I'm going to try and look at, essentially. But I think you make a really important point in that any diet where you are cutting out a food group of any kind is going to have its challenges, because there is certain nutrients that you might not necessarily be able to get on that diet. And so I think when people just say, I'm going to go vegan because I watched this documentary on Netflix, and they don't really think too much about what veganism actually is and what types of foods they need to make sure they're getting all the essential nutrients, I think that's when it becomes problematic. And I suspect, Irina, you've probably encountered lots of these individuals, so I completely understand where you're coming from. And I think that I suppose my basic advice to anyone who was a plant-based athlete, or vegan, which is obviously a little bit more extreme, is to go on. There's lots of information online. So the Vegan Society, and there's lots of websites that actually do have information, and have a look at the types of foods that you are actually eating, and say to yourself, do you think you are actually getting all the nutrients you need? So I would almost park the performance bit to one side and just say, well, am I getting enough vitamin B12? I'm probably not. If I am a vegan, then maybe I should supplement. Should I go see a doctor and get a blood test? All of these types of things. Just consider it. And I think that, it's not to say that eating plant-based is going to be worse for you. Definitely not. In many instances, it might be better for you. But I think you just need to make these considerations and have a look at your diet in a little bit more detail and just match up, things like omega-3s. Are you getting enough omega-3s? Find out what foods are rich in omega-3s, and then look at what you're eating. And then if you aren't eating them, make sure you add them to your diet. So just try and make sure you are covering all of those bases.
I think that's so important. And I went vegetarian about 2.5 years ago, and I tried the vegan route to see. I kept getting injured, and I was like, so I'm going to totally overhaul my diet. And I couldn't do it because as a busy mum, a busy job, but training, hours and hours every week, I didn't have enough time in my life to really prepare all the foods. And because we live in the middle of nowhere, the actual produce we can buy is very limited. But I really took, my husband was like, well, if you're going to do this, you've got to really educate yourself on how you do this, and to make sure you're still getting all the right proteins and everything, as you say. And I think that's so important. And I think that the biggest thing I have taken away from it is that actually, because I've cut out meat, I have to really plan what I'm going to eat. And I think that's almost where the benefits are from, because I have to really plan my protein and what I'm actually going to eat, and prepare it and think about it. Whereas before, I could kind of just, if I went to a restaurant or whatever, there was going to be something that I could eat. And I think a lot of people find that is that suddenly you have to really think. And it's really opened my eyes to how diet and nutrition has affected both my performance and my recovery. So I'm really looking forward to keep us updated on that, Tom.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I really look forward to seeing what your findings, and very topical.
Yeah. No, it's huge at the moment. And I think that, like you say, one of the harder bits is the convenience of it. It's a lot more difficult when you're going out and trying to find something that might be suitable for you. I think it is changing. It's getting better. In the next few years, it will be a lot easier.
Even the French in Carrefour, they're like, well, we're going to have to offer a few vegetarian options. There's less, oh la la. Oh, no.
I really enjoyed that. Loads of interesting stuff, and I'm pretty sure our listeners will too. Thanks for your time, Tom. I really appreciate that. Been very generous today. Thanks.
You're welcome. Good to talk.
Thank you, Tom.
I really enjoyed that. Great to hear from Tom Eddy, and some good advice for our listeners too. And also it was nice, he was partial to a bit of red wine and Lindt balls.
Knackered.
So it's not all lettuce and couscous.
Oh no, you wouldn't get very far in lettuce and couscous. How's your diet at the moment? When you start getting back into training, do you find you eat better naturally?
No, it's a conscious decide to think about quite. But
No.
It was similar to what Tom said, actually, that he found himself in a routine, and when he gets in this routine, he has this and this, and that's pretty much where I'm at the moment. I'm just trying to do. I think it's something I saw Kipchoge shared. Just keep things simple.
You're setting your sights quite high for the next marathon.
Yeah, go big. But just keep it simple. And that's what I'm trying to do. So, typical day for me would be every day seems to be a porridge start. And then kind of snack time about 10 o'clock, 10:30 would be coffee, fruit and nuts. And then I usually have soup maybe for lunch with some wholemeal bread. And then afternoon again will be a similar healthy snack. My problem is if I stay awake past 10 o'clock, that's it then. I hit the cereal and the junk. So
I can't eat past, after 8, when I've had my dinner, I wouldn't. Bryn does that. He's like, well, what should we have next? He gets like a tub of ice cream out. And I'm like, oh no, not before I just go to bed. Maybe it's a man thing. You think you might get called out in the middle of the night.
Yeah, maybe you have to jump in to do some action or something. I don't know. But
oh, hello.
Yeah, that's a different podcast. But yeah, I should be, this is where I need to kind of exercise.
But maybe you're not eating enough during the day. Because if I'm hungry at that time of day, it normally means that I've had soup for lunch.
Yeah, well, I do. In the past, when I have been guilty of calorie counting and stuff like that, this is and I don't do it now because I just through kind of habit, I know roughly quantities and portion size and stuff. So my tea was appropriate. I had potatoes last night. I had cabbage and broccoli and salmon, I think it was some whitefish. But yeah, I just like a nibble. I get greedy.
Yeah.
But what I need to do is make sensible decisions. So I started off eating carrots and apples, and then I was kidding myself, and then I went in for a bowl of shreddies about 10 minutes later, and a massive bowl of shreddies. So that's where I let myself down. I have little moments.
You don't let yourself down if you're hungry.
Well, maybe I could eat better quality food. That's it. But yeah, what about yourself? Now that you're base training.
Well, you have to I find it tricky, my feeding schedule, because with the kids and they're busy and my running slots tend to be first thing in the morning and in the evening. And so if I need to do something big in the morning, then getting fuel in before means getting up early. Yeah. And I refuse to set my alarm any earlier than the kids already wake me up, because also, if you're a mum or dad, you'll know this. If you get up, the little heads poke around the door and go, what you doing? Let's all get up. Hey, let's party. So I do find that. So I do try, if I know I'm going out longer than an hour, I try to have shove a banana or something, but I don't really like it. I'm quite happy. If I didn't know that it's not great for you, I would quite happy run for an hour and a half in the morning without any fuel. Yeah. But then it has a knock-on effect for the rest of the day. But I'm really super simple eater. I'm not, I do not have a glamorous palate. I know the looks and my glamorous lifestyle tell another story, but I like really simple fare. I've been a vegetarian for a little while now, and that seems to work for me. I tried down the vegan route. That didn't work for me. I couldn't get enough calories in. I found it really restrictive and really tricky to plan. And the French, they're getting in more to the veggie stuff, but quite often you can go to a restaurant and there isn't even a veggie option. Oh, wow. So I found that a little bit restrictive. So I do eat mainly a sort of plant-based diet, but yogurt I find a really good source of protein, and so I do eat a lot of yogurt. And I try, and I want to set a really good example for my kids of just eating really normal food. When I'm hungry, I eat. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat. I try and eat enough calories. I try and eat a broad range of something, and I find that works for me. And I try not to overthink it, and I just eat what's there. And if I feel like a bit of chocolate, I have a bit of chocolate. If I feel like a burger, I'll have a veggie burger. And if I don't, I'll have a salad. I just really try and be in tune with my body. Not only just for myself, I think that helps me be healthy and keep a bit of perspective on everything. But also I really want my kids to be sitting around a table thinking mum is just eating normally. And
well, this is, I think when I was counting calories, I was probably stopped. I was quite happy with it generally. I know it wasn't a healthy behavior, but I was more worried how I was kind of projecting food in the house and how people were kind of had the relationship with food. So luckily, you know, I'm not really yearning to go down that route. But I was curious, do you look at kind of increasing your iron, you know, being a vegetarian?
Yeah, so I take supplements because not only because I'm vegetarian, but also because I'm at altitude. So it's really important. And I have my blood work tested and I get really borderline and I can feel it in my energy and in my breathing. Nearly always as I'm coming out of the winter and as I'm going into the winter again, that I start a little bit breathless when I'm running and I feel really tired, and I go in and I get a heavy iron supplement. It's very hard to up your iron just on food alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a bit of medical intervention. So yeah, I'm really hot on. I take my supplements, my B12, my omega-3s, and my iron. And I know that if I counted my calories a little bit more, I often think, you know, Eddie, if you lost like 3 or 4 kgs, you'd be faster. But I don't think it would be sustainable for me. That I've been the same weight since circa 1984. I've had 3 kids, piled on the old pounds, as my husband likes to remind me. But then the minute I had the babies, you know, and I started moving again and stuff, I just went back to this weight, and that's just the way I've been. And I think if I ever try and be lighter, which, okay, you know, and you'd weight ebbs and flows in your life, doesn't it? And when I've been lighter, it just leads to, I just haven't got the energy, and life's too short, in my opinion, to think, well, I could get 1 minute faster up that hill if I wasn't carrying this extra little winter holiday weight. But I enjoy my food too much.
Was it Tom Evans said that, you know, he wouldn't be the same weight all year, that we would go in seasons?
Yeah. Well, I actually find it harder to keep the weight on in the winter when I'm doing all that. When I was skiing loads in the winter, I was almost a different shape to how I am in the summer, because you're out for such a long period of time. It's such a low intensity, but I found that quite hard I did lose a bit of weight then, but then back to the Tartiflette. Let's talk about upcoming races. People in better shape than us at the moment.
Yes, I hope they are, if they've got a race this weekend anyway. Like, I saw one of these last man standing events. Apologies, Florence Court. I think that's over in the Lake District. I could be wrong. But yeah, it's one of these 4.2 mile loop, and you've got an hour to complete it. And then off you go again once you've completed the loop, and last man standing. Now, I know recently there was a last man standing and there was a new record, so fingers crossed for that one, everybody. I don't know what the loop's like as far as terrain's concerned, but yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye on that. Liverpool to Leeds Canal race this weekend too, 130 miles from the Old Hall Street in Liverpool along the Leeds and Liverpool Canal towpath. Yeah, that sounds, I love these point to points, you know, big cities to big cities, interesting route. I know it's not hills and stuff like that, but yeah, I'd love that. And Dan Lawson, was he still a record holder for the one
Grand Union Canal?
Yeah. So that's right up his street, that kind of event.
He's not doing that. I know he's doing something else big in September, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about it yet. I'll find out from him. It's a good little, it's an adventure. He's doing his own personal down style adventure.
Oh, wicked.
Grand Tour Skiddaw. Have you ever done this?
No, but this would be awesome. Yeah. 44 miles, waymarked, ultra race, taking the beautiful scenery of the Northern Lake District. Starts and finishes at Limehouse School. And it does about, let's see, I throw these numbers out and they're nothing to you, are they? 7,000 feet?
Yeah, I can work in both. It's about
right.
2,000, just over 2,000 meters that for our
that's nothing, is it, for your mountains?
Yeah, for over 44 miles. No, really. I mean, it's nice. I'd call that runnable. And then the big ones this week. Shout out to anybody doing UTMB, hopefully, by the time, I wonder if anyone's listening to this as they're doing UTMB. Wouldn't that be the dream, Gary?
We've definitely got some people in the Facebook group. Ian Oldham and Paul Walker. I'm pretty sure both of those are heading over there. So yeah, good luck.
Good luck. We've got the TDS and CCC. That will have happened by the time this goes out. But I hope if you were racing, you had a great race. And UTMB, the big one, going out on Friday. Who Do you know anyone? Do you follow any of the sort of the elite field? No, you don't want to know. You don't. Well, we got Beth going again. She did a run this morning, average pace 6-minute mile. You know, classic 10-miler in the mountains. She's obviously in good shape. Don't know. Haven't had any underground.
She could do well.
Gossip on her, but she's gonna do really well. So I'd love to see her go out there, and I'm really interested to see what the field is like. There's quite a few Americans I've seen that have gone over. Obviously, I think it's like 60% of French that are there, and it'll be a much smaller international field. I wonder what the total number of people racing. The weather looks good after all the rain that we've had, and so look forward to seeing how that plays. Did you watch it last year, where literally you could follow? They had cameras on bikes, and you could follow.
No, I didn't see. I did see bits of it, but no, I never really.
It's addictive. I watched Courtney Dauwalter, so this is going to be exciting. Have Courtney Dauwalter and Beth Pascal ever gone head to head? I don't think they have.
My money would be on Beth at the moment, you know.
Courtney did pull out with stomach troubles in Hard Rock a couple of, when was that? About a month ago.
Yeah.
But you have, so you can watch them suffering. And I almost couldn't watch Courtney climb up the last climb when she did win UTMB. Yeah. And she just looked in such a world of pain. And you know, she was just in an ultra when you want to go really deep inside yourself. And the last thing you want is a camera on you. Oh, gosh.
When we watched the Western States, how much effort they were putting in, and it kind of made me feel like, oh, I need to work a bit harder when I do races, because I do not put that level of effort in on a long race, at least. Anyway.
Well, when we do the London Marathon side by side, and you realise how hard I'm working next to you as you're talking, and you're going, Eddie,
you're not going to run with me because I've got my bloody camera on. You've already told me.
No, I'll run just ahead.
Damien Hall as well too. Good luck to Damien Hall. He's over there. I saw he did some Facebook posts about offsetting his carbon and stuff like that. It was really interesting just to, you know, see the numbers of what these trips cost the planet. And really interesting. So good luck to Damien.
I haven't seen anything because I'm on a holiday this week, and when I'm on a holiday with the kids, we turn off our everything apart from work. We turn off all our phones, and it's a bliss. I mean, I don't even miss it. I just love not. Yeah. I don't realize the noise that Facebook and Instagram and all that is on all the time, and then you resort to it in a moment of boredom, don't you? And you flick, I do, and you flick through. So it's really refreshing. I could easily not have it in my life, but then you'd be.
There's some things I need to be connected to, which keep me on Facebook and stuff like that. But generally, similar to yourself. Oh, we've got that'd be on one of those News at 10, isn't it? Where the kids kind of ambush a Zoom call.
Child just entered the room in a state of disarray and then went, "Ooh."
Classic.
Right, what you got coming up?
More training, week 2. So I think I mentioned earlier, we've got, what have I got this week? So we've got the 6 times 5 minutes, and then very similar to yourself, actually, I've got this progression run. I think mine is 10 minutes easy, 20 minutes zone. So 10 minutes zone 2, 20 minutes zone 3, and then 20 minutes zone 4.
So it's pretty much, apart from I don't think I'm going to cover my easy 5K in 20 minutes.
No. That would be, for me anyway, that would be a stretch. And then what else have we got? Some hill session. See, this is the funny thing, actually. The hill session, which is impossible for where I live, it's basically 2 times 10 minutes uphill, and I just don't have those hills. So what I'm going to do is break. So I do 20 minutes of work, basically. So that's how I'll approach that, and just trying to be consistent. I've got nothing on this weekend, I don't think, big. But
this is unusual for you, Gary.
It's only Tuesday, Eddie. Anything can happen. I'll
be
a skid on Saturday.
You'll be like, I just spoke over that, jump in that race. But
how about you?
Just loads of miles, as many miles as I can fit in this week while I've got husband on holiday too, and kids in a pool, and then next week the kids go back to school. Not till halfway through the week, but still, I've got 2 days. They're gone. I'm going up those mountains. Sorry, emails. You can wait.
I was going to ask you actually, how long does this base you keep banging on about? How long does the base period last?
Well, I think it's basically while my coach is really busy and he's focusing on trying to win the OCC. And so he's like, you just keep running, and he's not checking. I'm like, just don't worry about my plan, for the next few weeks. I'll just keep running all these miles. So while he's not checking, I'm like, I'm just going to keep on running all these. I'm not doing any sessions.
It's another question, actually. When you do that, if you send a message to somebody, when they've seen it, because I think their little face pops up on Messenger. If you're on final surge and your coach hasn't checked it, do you know they've not checked it? I've never used to say something like final surge or stuff like that.
No, I don't think there's any way. Like, same with Training Peaks. There's no way you can see if your coach has seen it. It's not like it's not like Messenger or this is seen. But I think, like, I get alerts. I actually don't. I turn off the alerts because otherwise I get 800 emails of people comment. I just open up the plans and sort of go through and see people have commented. So no, I don't know, but if I ask a question, I'll get it answered. So I know he's always looking, because he'll make a comment if I do something really bad. But I would think, so I've got this little progression run this week, and then next week, once I can get my head back into it, and I need to finalize my race plan, which I'm still not telling you, and you tried to ask over WhatsApp because
my goodness me, you blanked me big time.
Totally blanked you. I'm like, no, you can wait like everybody else on tenterhooks of what I'm gonna do. So once I will I'll tell you next week. And then the hard work starts. I'm going for it.
She's going
no
for
more
it.
Fizz, no more party Eddie, back to the grind. Right, good luck everybody. UTMBing, Grand Tour skidding, anything, go out there, run hard, run strong.
I'm really curious, this last man standing. I'm looking forward to watching how that progresses.
We've got to let's do our competition.
Yeah, kit bag bundle. 2 kit bags. And what we asked for, some running holiday snaps. And I have to say, Eddie, I think I said last week, I absolutely love this competition. Really, really good. And my favorite was Nikki Carr-Walls. Nikki, she upped the game. We had a little movie there, and it sounds like she kind of tricked the kids into doing the light wake walk route, and before they knew it, 40 odd miles across the moors, but smiled all the way. So fantastic. I really enjoyed that. So you got my vote. And a little just a shout out to I went for all the Nickies, actually. I didn't realize I'd done that, but Nikki McCallan, I love this picture with the stags in the background. What a great shot that was. So
picture.
You don't win anything, Nikki. Don't get excited. Second Nikki.
I had I wanted to give a couple of shout outs before I give my winner to Georgina Phillips, who posted a picture of my nephew who I haven't seen for ages. She's got into running in a big way, which I love. And she's got him out in the Scottish hills, and he wanted to run up hills. Oh, I love that. And then a Japanese lady, Miyako Shimuji. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong, but I gave it a good effort. She got herself to Japan after 3.5 years to go and see her parents. And she'd said it had been a lot of tests and paperwork, but she got there and she got out on the trails. That must have felt like heaven. Yeah. But my winner, my favorite from quite early on in the competition was Claire McKinley, who made her husband go out running in the Scottish Highlands. It was a lovely picture. They'd escaped from the kids, and she's smiling and loving it, and he's having a little weep on her shoulder. So I thought maybe she could share her cheer charge goodie bag with him, cheer him up with a flapjack. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, so much for entering that competition.
Get in touch, Nikki Carr, and through Messenger or something. I'll try and get in touch with you and we'll get your address and get some whatever else Tim will kind of throw in the goodie bag too. We'll get them sent.
And same to you, Claire McKinley. Thank you.
Awesome. Well done, everybody.
That was episode 52 of A Lot of Chatting on Run to the Hills. I'm Eddie Sutton.
And I'm Gary Thwaites.
And let's run to the hills.